Hi there, it's Jeff, and this is my latest project, my Dovetail Jig. Dovetails by hand can be so time consuming, but with this jig it makes life so much easier. You can do repetitive dovetails for your project if you're making drawer boxes or any type of boxes at all. Doesn't matter what size. This jig here can do this job nice and easy for you repetitively. So stick around, especially to the end where I'm going to show you the finished results of what this jig can do. Okay, before we begin making this, I'm just going to run through some the materials that I'm using and the actual jig itself. It's an alloy jig. Well, it looks like sort of like a comb setup, but this is made for the router bits, and as I've already mentioned, this is for your router table preferably. It can be used though if handheld router, which is what I used to use before when I was using this jig. But yeah, I'm going to be showing you how to use this on the router table and adapting this extra jig that's going to go on top to support your material. Now the jig usually comes with the router bits. So this is your dovetail cutter or tails, and I think it's around about a 1/6 pitch, something around about that. It's not too aggressive. And this is the other one here when you go to do your pins. It's just a straight cutter, again with the bearing. Now this bearing is to suit the teeth of this combs, and you'll see that in the video when we're going to use it. I'll leave links in the description if you're interested in something like this. I've had this for a while, but I've just, like I said, mainly just use it with a handheld router. Now I'm going to be using a bit of solid oak stock, which is going to sit on top of my jig here. And basically you could use whatever offcut material you wanted for this fence. Let's call it a fence. So you could use whatever material you wanted to for that fence. I happen to have a bit of this offcut of this nice American oak. It's regardless of what you use, it's actually a bit of a shame because it's going to be covered up by this plain MDF, which is going to sandwich it front and back. And these are essentially sacrificial boards that go on the face of this jig. So when the router does come through on the bottom there, it's going to mainly chew into this MDF, which I can replace at when I see fit. And I'm going to make these with two screws on each side, countersink, so you can remove them. I'll make an actual, when I cut this to size, I'll make one that's going to be an actual template. So when I do need to make some more, I'll just copy that one for the hole measurements, and then I screw this on. But that's basically it. I'm going to screw this on, and I'm also going to add on the top of the jig a bit of track, a bit of T-track, and that's going to incorporate a sliding stop, which you'll see me use in this jig later on as we get going. So let's get to it. We'll cut this to size, get this fitted on, fit this onto the actual jig base, and we'll router out the top for the T-track, get that in place, and then make a stop, and then I'll show you how this thing is going to work on your router table. Okay, when it comes to attaching our support piece onto the jig now, there is actually a line scribed into the jig. Okay, so you can just see that I've just put a pencil line through it as well, and I've also scribed a center line through the jig. So what I've found is that I'm going to put this support on that line that's provided on the jig, and that should be enough support for our workpiece when it sits on there to router right through. So I'm just going to put it onto there. I'm going to use a square, combination square that's set up at that line. Okay, now that the actual jig is ready, and it's turned out quite nice, I'm really happy with it. Now it's a matter of demonstrating how to use this. So I've got some stock here ready, it's already machined, and you want to make sure that your pieces are nice and square. They are to the same lengths for your sides and your ends. I'm going to be making like a rectangular type of box with these, and I've marked also the face side of them, so just so we can put it together and we know which way the face side is going. So once we have that, you can work out which side that you want your actual tails and which side, well, you want your dovetails. For me, I'm going to have my actual dovetails on the ends, and the pins will be in the longer part. So what we need to do now is measure the center of this piece. I'm going to put a mark on that, and then I'm going to line it up on my jig with the center line that I've scribed in the middle of the actual jig on that comb, on that tongue there. So once I do that, you'll see in the video that I'll line it up there. We can move the stop up against that, and then we clamp this, one on each side. It'll be like that. and as you can see, that stop becomes like a guide, so you put your next piece in the same position. So let's put the router bits into the router and into the router table. I'll mark the center of these, we'll clamp it up, and we'll get going. Okay, we're just about ready to give this jig a trial run. I've got my piece of material here sitting in the jig. It's in the center, and we can see on the marks there, and it's ready to clamp in position. But before I do anything, what I've decided to do is use a bit of off-cut 3mm MDF. I'm going to clamp that on the front of my material and clamp it all together, just to prevent, when the cutter does cut and do the dovetails, just to prevent a bit of breakout that may occur. I'm not sure if it will, but just as a precaution, because the rotation of the cutter going into the material won't be a problem, but coming out. So we'll see what happens. Just as a precaution, I just thought I'd put this bit of 3mm MDF. Also, what I think I may do as well is put a little bit of extra 3mm packing as well underneath my material like that, mainly because my material is very thin. It's only around about 12mm, probably just under ½ inch. It wouldn't be a problem if you're using thicker material, but because it's so thin, I'm worried about the bearing here that travels into these combs. Not enough of that bearing is traveling in the comb. So if I by raising this all up, which means that my cutter and the bearing will raise up as well, leaving more material or that bearing running on the comb, just as a safety precaution. So let's get into adjusting the cutter depth. Okay, there's the thickness of my material. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so the dovetails, the tails are done, and that was a great success. Next part is going to be doing the pins, so the cutout for these. So firstly we'll need to change our router cutter. So it's going to be a straight cutter with the bearing to suit. And then next to line up this stop to where we're going to need it in place of this. Let's move the camera close. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do a little test piece first to make sure everything lines up and it's nice and tight. Okay, so the way I'm going to try and attempt this, and I've seen a couple of other ways that you can do this online, but the way I'm going to do this is, my method is going to be placing this dovetail piece that I've just done, and basically we want the cutout to be where these tails are. So if you line up this, your workpiece, so that they actually line up with these slots evenly, put your stop in position, I think that should work. Again, I'm going to raise it up so the bearing, I haven't changed the cutter yet, but so the bearing is rolling in the comb correctly. But like I said, I will do a test piece first, and it's always good to do a test piece first, test how your fit is, and yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, I've got a test piece there, let's have a look. Yep, somewhere around there, and I think the good news is that the bearing is travelling on the comb nicely, so I won't need to pack this one up. Okay, that's ready to go. Okay, well I'm up to gluing up the dovetail joints now with my box. I'm just going to apply some PVA glue with a brush, and put some glue all over the actual joints, the pins, and then we'll put them all together, and we'll clamp it up. Okay. Okay, I've just glued up my dovetails in the box, as you can see. With just put some pressure on with the clamps. I've done it so all the dovetails have made sure they're touching the shoulders and all the glue has oozed out. It's nice and tight now. I was actually surprised the joints were really nice and tight. It should be a nice fit. The only other thing to do as well is when you are making boxes like this is just to make sure that it's square, and we're going to do that by checking it diagonally. If we've got a measurement that's pretty much the same in both directions, give or take, you know, 0.5 mil to 1 millimeter, it's fine. And that's it. Leave that to dry overnight, and then we'll clean up the joints later. So let's get on to checking this for square. So over here I'm around about 275, and this way, yep, about 275.5. That's good enough. I'm going to let that dry overnight and we'll clean it up. Well, what do you think? I'm pretty pleased with the results. I think the dovetails came out pretty good. And the good thing about doing them on a jig, especially like this, if you've got plenty of boxes to make, whether it be, you know, something small like this, tinkering around like a little glory box or jewelry box, but also drawers, that can be very time consuming. But with something like this, this comes in really handy just to set it up with the guide, and you do all your one side at a time, do all the ends. The only thing I will need to do myself is, because I've had this base before, and I used to use it with a plunge router from on the reverse without this, and I need to replace the bearings on this thing. They're a little bit worn on the top, and that was due to using thin material because the bearing isn't going up as much, but you can put packers like I did. But yeah, if you're using something around about 1/2 inch upwards, your bearing's going to be travelling on that comb. There's no problem. But just keep that in mind if you are using some thin material or stock. Just so your bearing travels a good portion on the comb, you may have to lift it up just by putting a bit of packing underneath like I did. And happy days. I'll leave links in the description for this comb and the set if you are interested in doing something like this yourself. It certainly is a lot easier than doing them by hand, the traditional way, but there's not that there's nothing wrong with that, but these just give you accuracy, nice, clean, tight fit every time, you know. So yeah, thumbs up if you liked it, share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can keep up to date with the latest videos that are coming out, and hopefully I'll see you in one of my next videos.